All offseason, all we heard is Utah physical enough to play in the Big 12. Can Utah win big games on the road? Can Cam Rising stay healthy? Well, that one we don't know the answer to. But the first two, Utah checked off in spades today. A massive performance in Oklahoma State. What a game for the Utah Utes, and we're breaking it down in all of its glory on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and on today's show, we are talking everything Utah winning against Oklahoma State. And I'm excited to bring on not just a former host of this podcast, not just a college sports writer, but one of the best football minds in the state of Utah in Bryan Brown. Bryan, this was such a fun, wild, insane game, and I just loved almost every moment of it. Let's take out the part where Utah's kind of defense let Oklahoma State back in it late, but this was a massive win, a top 15 win on the road. The biggest Utah road win since 2018. They threw up the stat there. To do it without Cam Rising, it's hard to put into perspective what this means for not just the Utah football program, but obviously this team's season.
Without a doubt, and thank you for that very kind introduction. I suggested just straight up football guy in the beginning, but you nailed it as always, JT. It's great to be here with you. And this is we talked about it early in the week. I was excited to come on with this one because I knew, your football senses are tingling in some games. And I just knew that Utah had something to prove in this game. And I think they really did. And maybe it's not what everybody else thought they had to prove, but I think it's something that internally, and I don't have any sources. It's not me reporting anything. This is just me, good old football guy, watching football and thinking football. That's a football team that had something to prove today about how good they are as a team, that this isn't just the Cam Rising show. This is Utah football. And they showed the world in true Utah style, grinding it out, fist fighting in a phone booth, that we will not become you will become us. And it was a great, great game to watch. I think I had to take my watch off, speaking of watches, in the second quarter because I was getting so many alerts, and we didn't need any paramedics arriving, but it was definitely a stressful game, but a fun one, and just I want to say traumatic, but also incredible victory for the Utes.
I mean, so we'll talk about everything that goes around with Cam Rising at the end of the show. We have to talk about Isaac Wilson stepping up too, but I think the most important thing you hit on. Okay, let's get to the important thing in a moment. I just want to once again reiterate. I think one of the things I'm most fired up about this game is, like, those of us who watch this team so frequently, we know how good the brand of football they play is. So I was so frustrated all offseason when, once again, I understand the Big 12 fans who didn't love Utah being the favorites, but when some of them, their reasoning was, you came from the Pac-12, you're not going to have success in the Big 12. That just drove me insane, and I was so happy to watch this Utah team own the line of scrimmage for the majority of 4 quarters against Oklahoma State. And it's that success in the line of scrimmage that I want to talk about, particularly on the defensive side of the ball for this Utah team. Ollie Gordan had not gotten it going this season, and all week long we said this would not be the game that he would get it going, because this is the best front seven he's faced on the season. And now we said too, this is going to be the best defense that Oklahoma State had played all year. And sure enough, this Utah team showed up. This was a bad matchup for the Cowboys. It was another thing we reiterated. When you look at, hey, they want to set up the run, then they rely on the receivers to make some plays on the outside, but Utah defensive backs are also going to pick you off and disrupt the flow of your offense. And Oklahoma State, I mean, it didn't matter if it was Alan Bowman or anyone else under center. They had nothing going until the very end of this game.
They really didn't. And even then, I don't know that you can put a ton of that on a Utah defense that up until that point had held, I believe it was 34 yards until in the second half. Had held Oklahoma State to 34 yards in the second half up until that drive. In fact, that drive almost doubled the total number of yards that Utah's defense had allowed. And there's a variety of reasons. I don't want to gloss over giving up 14 points in the fourth quarter, because that is something you want to focus on, but it's a good problem. And that is something that I think we're seeing a lot of with Utah right now, is that they have a lot of what I like to call good problems, in that things are fixable, things can be improved, and you're still sitting 4-0. And I think that's the biggest, most critical point of it. But you're finding out more and more about this team with every game, and it's not costing you in the win-loss column. And right now, Utah is without a doubt, in my mind, the trending favorite. We're recording this before the conclusion of the BYU Kansas State game, so I don't know what happens in that one. Right now, Baylor and Colorado are tied at 24, and who saw that one coming? Not me, because that's definitely not what I wrote about this week with that one. But I also didn't see them starting a new quarterback. So a lot of things happening in week 4 right now, and the Big 12 is going to be chaos, and that's what we expected all along, I think. But from chaos comes the clarity that is Utah football. And when I would talk to people, and I don't do breakdowns or things like that on podcasts anymore. I still have plenty of friends that I like to talk football with, but when people would ask me my thoughts, I said the same thing over and over again. It comes down to culture and mentality. And Utah, they believe that they're going to win in those final moments, and they want you in those kinds of fights. And so if you give up a few touchdowns at an end just to make it close and then snatch that hope away like it's a chain around the neck of Oklahoma State, I'm all here for it. And I just I think you saw the difference. We talk about tenure with Kyle Whittingham and Mike Gundy, but I think you saw the difference in why Kyle Whittingham is considered one of the best coaches in college football, and Mike Gundy's just done a really good job at Oklahoma State. And that's not to disrespect Gundy or anything like that, but benching the quarterback in the third quarter, that's an interesting move. It may pay off down the road, but I think it may have been sacrificing a potential win today in terms of the long-term benefit. So just another, and I watched it with a bunch of Utah fans and some friends, just at a friend's house, and we're used to this as Utah fans. This is how we win games, right? These drag, knuckle dragging fights. I shouldn't say knuckle dragging, but these fist fights in a phone booth. That's the only way I know how to describe it. And it's just Utah wants to win 22-19 in every single game that they can play. That's how they want to win.
It is how they want to win. And it was just so impressive to watch this team work throughout the game. Through 3 quarters, 156 yards for Oklahoma State. There are only 37 yards in the third quarter. Go back to the first quarter, Oklahoma State had 71, but then that dropped to 48. And yes, then in the fourth quarter, that's where it jumps up to 129. But like overall, it's just amazing to see the struggles that this team, these Cowboys from Stillwater had moving the ball on this Utah squad. The fact that Utah had 200 more rushing yards than Oklahoma State, a top 15 team with the Dope Walker Award winner in their backfield, is unreal. And it's a credit to the front 7. Junior Tafuna, Keanu Tanuvasa, devouring double teams. No Connor O'Toole today. Pass rush, Van Fillinger and those guys did a good job still getting pressure at times as well as containing. But I also say, even when they did not get home, and the Oklahoma State offensive line held up overall solid in pass protection, there were very few places to go with the ball. And yes, Alan Bowman missed some throws, but this is where you're reminded, like, why did Utah lose so badly to Oregon? Because last year, Bo Nix made NFL throw after NFL throw. Utah's DBs make you make NFL throws. And if you are not an NFL quarterback, Alan Bowman, we know he's not that guy. We saw what happened tonight because there ain't much separation. There are some plays where those guys got open, but overall, just so impressed with Lander Barton, and at linebacker spots, another guy I wanted to mention, Gilman was fantastic. So happy that Teo didn't get thrown out for targeting to just, I feel like you could praise almost everyone on this Utah defense, because when you hold a top 15 team to only 3 points for the majority of the game, it's just exceptional. What stood out to you most in the game plan and the execution tonight defensively?
The trust and the faith in the back half and the front half to do their job. I don't think Utah really brought a ton of pressure today, and I haven't had a chance to really look at the pressure stats fully, but at the same time, just watching the game, they didn't bring a ton of pressure, and even when they did, it was mostly safe pressures. It looked like a lot more cage rushing, meaning they wanted to contain the quarterback a lot more.
Yes.
And you mentioned Junior Tafuna. He stood out to me on multiple plays. There was one play where Ollie Gordan bounced outside and Junior just barely got a shoulder, but he recovered enough to go and tackle him before he could break away. There's another play where he chased down and running back on a screen. I think Ollie Gordan's trading the boogeyman for Junior Tafuna in his nightmares now, because he's going to see him chasing him down for the next at least the rest of the season, and then probably at some point in the NFL too, because I actually thought Ollie Gordan was going to have a breakout game this week.
You
And I
did.
think, yeah, I mean, it just felt like he was
He
primed
was
for
due.
one,
He was definitely due.
that Oklahoma State passing attack looked so dangerous on paper, right? And you saw the yardage that they were able to rack up against, I believe it was Toledo, in their game. Tulsa, thank you. One of those T teams. It's either Toledo, Tulsa,
I mean,
or Tulane.
Toledo beat Mississippi State, so I have no problem shouting out Toledo for also beating an SEC team because we enjoy when SEC also falters.
I mean, if we're talking about MAC programs or SWAC programs or whatever, all these group of 5 type schools, there's a lot of good teams. And Tulane was in there blow for blow today against my mind's going blank. It doesn't matter. But the point is that Utah's the faith that Utah has in their secondary, right? And you mentioned Teo Johnson. He did a really good job. I think the targeting call was iffy until you saw them start to slow it down, and then Dean Blandino jumped on and explained, like, it's not necessarily targeting. And this is where sometimes what we think the rule is, like those subtle changes throughout the year actually make it a little bit different. You mentioned Gilman. I thought he was great today.
Great.
Cameron Calhoun. Elijah Davis, Scooby Davis.
I forgot them.
A few breakdowns here and there, but also like some of that is just going to happen when you've got wide receivers that are as big and strong and as talented as Oklahoma State. This is a school that produced Des Bryant and Justin Blackman. There have been a plethora. They've always had good wide receiver talent out there. So it's not, I think there are things to be corrected, but I don't know that we're ready to fixate them on as eternal problems for Utah.
I mean, if you would have told me going into the game that Oklahoma State would have 237 yards passing through the air, I would have been like, yeah, I'll absolutely take that. That means the Utah DBs did their job, and they did exceptional until those last couple drives of the fourth quarter. And also, we got to move on to the offense in a moment, but Brian, it was hot out there. So definitely when you see those missed tackles, like I had Florida game flashbacks from 2022. I was worried. I was like, okay, is this going to become a heat thing? Are we going to see these guys get fatigued? And I think that played a role in it a little bit late, but overall, this defense hung in tough, really impressed with them. But of course, the defense is only half of the reason Utah won this game. No Cam Rising, but the offense still found a way to put points on the board. We got to talk about Utah's offensive performance in one moment. But first, want to take a moment to talk with you all about one of the sponsors of today's episode of Locked On Utes. It's our friends at 5 Hour Energy. 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list of to-do work or just a list of do-it-yourself projects that you want to tackle at home, you can take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects that you have to get done, whether it's at work or at home. So that's why you don't need to forget the most essential supply in order to tackle the rest of the workload. 5 Hour Energy shot. With zero sugar and a convenient portable size, it's the perfect pick-me-up for getting stuff done. The 5 Hour Energy website has flavor galore, like watermelon, tropic burst, grape, and berry, and I'm just barely scratching the surface too. There is a flavor for everyone. You got to try them all. On the site, you even have the option to build your own 12 or 24 pack. You can choose flavors, and it's delivered right to your door. And if you go to 5hourenergy.com, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, and get some 5 Hour Energy products today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB, all caps, no spaces, to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, so you can go to 5hourenergy.com today and get some 5 Hour Energy sent your way. All right, Brian, the defense was the best unit that Utah had, but I also came away incredibly impressed with the offense. And I'm going to do something that I don't think I've done a lot on this season, and that is give a ton of praise to Utah's offensive line. I thought this was their best performance on the season. I thought they have had good moments, and I thought for the majority of the Utah State game, they played well. But I thought today they did an exceptional job getting pushed. They were facing packed boxes frequently. And not only did they get pushed, I should say, but I mean, Micah Bernard just like carrying these guys with him. Like it's like he's got the sled strapped to him and moving the chains. The amount of times that he was first contacted, his yards after contact were exceptional tonight. The Utah ground game had to be great without Cam Rising, and they absolutely were. So impressed with this unit. And Micah Bernard, we did this a little bit earlier on the show this week. Micah Bernard is our RB1. 25 carries, 182 yards, 7.3 yards per carry. Bernard and the Utah offensive line, have yourself a day in Stillwater.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I thought that Micah was great in terms of just getting the job done, and he can be really electric and he can really push the envelope in terms of his athleticism. But he was a guy that just got the job done and made sure that they got 4, 5, 7, 10 yards almost every single time he touched the ball. And that to me was a big win for both he and this offensive line. You mentioned the offensive line. I thought they were fantastic today.
They were.
Huge credit to Andy Ludwig for just a quick little lesson out there for all these amateur football fanatics that love listening to this podcast. The wider you go in your formation, the better the angles are, the better you can block up front. And you saw that because every time they went fourth down, they went that wide pistol formation. And I know everybody loves to go under center. Pistol's so much better for that because it just gives you better angles for everything, less opportunity to fumble a snap, everything, blah, blah, blah. What a great job on a very minute detail from Andy Ludwig. And this is a guy with 40 years of football experience to remember that and plug it in at the perfect time. That man is dedicated to football, and he showed his true football guy side today. But you nailed it with the offensive line. I was going to ask you, take Isaac Wilson out of the equation, who would you give the game ball to? And Micah did a great job of running behind that offensive line, but they did a great job of opening up holes too.
Yeah, you know what? Before I say that, Brian, I made a grave mistake on this show because you mentioned Andy Ludwig. Morgan Scalley, I'm so sorry that we just went 16 minutes in this show without bringing your name up. The defensive game plan that you crafted reminded everyone why when Urban Meyer was going to the NFL, he wanted you to be your defensive coordinator. Why you were the man who shut down Caleb Williams 3 times throughout college. Unreal game plan from Morgan tonight to completely demoralize Oklahoma State. And he had Alan Bowman looking so bad that Oklahoma State fans all week were hyping this guy up, and they benched him at halftime because of what Morgan Scalley's defense was doing to him. So we'll talk about Morgan more on the show, but I love that you gave Ludwig the highlight too. As for the MVP, I think it still has to go to Micah for – it's all in college football and in sports in general. I don't love to say like, oh, this guy wanted it more than that guy. But my gosh, did Micah just want it tonight. He wanted every yard out there. He was not going to be denied. He was not going to be contained. He fought tooth and nail for every yard. And I loved what I saw from him, his explosiveness, his physicality. He's really transformed himself between the tackles, which used to not be his strength. And he thrived a lot tonight, carrying defenders with him for first downs. So Micah Bernard would be the guy who gets the offensive game, Paul. But Brian, I'm making up some other award for Dorian Singer because my goodness, was that man also on a mission on the outside. How about the penalty where it was, what was it, 2nd and 20 or whatever, and he picks up 16 yards, at least like 10 of those were all like by his sheer will. The catch behind his helmet, like, are you kidding me, Dorian Singer? This was an unreal game, his best as a Ute, and a reminder that he is one of the best receivers in college football. Utah's lucky to have him.
I think we got to say it, JT. He's the dog.
Dog.
Yeah, I loved Dorian Singer's play today. There are a lot of guys that really stood out in terms of like not just obviously making plays, but just the energy that they played with. And Micah Bernard was one of those. It seemed like every single rush, he was finding a way to fall forward, something that Utah absolutely focuses on and zeroes in on with running backs. And it was really productive today. Isaac Wilson did the same thing, had a couple rushes, picked up some crucial first downs, did the same thing, always made sure to fall forward. But Dorian Singer just set the tone offensively with his energy, the way that he talked but didn't push it too far. More just like he wasn't out there starting the fight, but he made sure the conversation was over, especially with his play. And just I'm sure he's beaten up and exhausted and all those kinds of things, but I hope he got an extra bag of Chick-fil-A on the flight home because that guy was phenomenal today. He had me juiced up watching him play, and I think he had that team juiced up as well. It's been a long, long time since Utah's had this kind of a dominant personality at the receiver position. I might even go back to Darren Carrington was a phenomenal receiver, just not
Yeah.
personality wasn't the same. But Kalen Clay, another one of those guys where his personality started to shine through at the end. But Kenneth Scott, another name that Utah fans will recognize. There's a few others over the years, but Dorian, if that's who he truly is, I need that guy every single game because he gave me juice today.
He absolutely gave me a juice as well. I was watching the game multiple times, and after Dorian would do something, I was fist pumping, standing up, whatever, because I just loved watching him go to work. Brant Keithy, fantastic as well. The big touchdown and several other big grabs. How about the rushing touchdown for him as well? Pass again, rushing touchdown for Keithy. Money Parks' massive grab. He only had 3 catches for 35 yards, but that one where it was thrown behind him and he dove backwards was an exceptional catch that he made. Singer's yardage ended up being 7 for 95. Felt like Singer was going to be in for a big. Utah needed their best to step up without Cam, and they did. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest scores, stats, and view live play-by-play and so much more in the same page where you place bets. You can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your $5 bet. And there are so many great NFL games to bet on, whether you're betting on the slate this weekend or in the future. How about next week's college football slate, too? We got the MLB playoffs are heating up. FanDuel is your place to be for all your sports betting needs. Make sure you guys head over to FanDuel today, because what is FanDuel? FanDuel is America's #1 sportsbook. That's FanDuel.com to get in on all the lines and action today. But you know who else stepped up without Cam Rising? Even though he only found out minutes before the game that he was starting, Isaac Wilson, freshman QB, on the road, top 15 team. And Oklahoma State has, you look up their history of teams they've beaten inside their building. It's impressive. They've gotten a lot of big wins. And Wilson was so good. Even his interceptions, I look at it like, I wish Utah had picked this blitz up better. And Oklahoma State, give them credit too. There was multiple coverage sacks where no one was really open. And Wilson, there were a couple times I wish he would have thrown it away. But I also understand, just in today's college football, you want to wait till the last second to try and make a play. But you already talked about him with his legs. Some of the big throws to Dorian, some of the big throws to Brant. He threw for over 200 yards in this game. And not only should Utah fans feel optimistic about what this team can do with Wilson, I mean, Kyle Whittingham, the fact that he even answered a question about hey, Cam's still the starter, obviously, but he said never say never. The fact that he even said never say never should show you how highly he thinks of Wilson, who was incredibly impressive tonight.
Well, that is the ethos of this football program at Utah is competition always. And so nobody's job is safe, not even Cam Rising. Now, that being said, it's hard to compare the two quarterbacks and see a single spot where Isaac Wilson is the better player outside of, the statistic of availability, right? If you're available to play, that makes it is. But at the same time, I think what we saw today was some great adjustments by Andy Ludwig, because I think you mentioned the pressure and the way that Oklahoma State sent a lot of what we call green dog delay blitzes, right? And Isaac kind of hesitated on some of those, and I think that was a great adjustment by Andy Ludwig. They started running just 2-man routes, and Brock Heward pointed this out at some point in the broadcast that they were protecting or leaving more guys in to protect. And another nod of the tip of the cap to Micah Bernard for his ability to pick up a lot of that in pass pro. Yeah, weird that alignment would recognize that, but it is those. That's how I see the game. Is always from that perspective of, if you don't block guys, you can't complete passes. And I've always said that the most important player in pass protection is always the quarterback. And the reason for that is, if you get the ball immediately, if you see the play immediately, if you see where the pressure's coming from and know where the hot is and where you need to go, that helps. I don't think Isaac saw it all game long, and so they made the game just a little bit simpler for him. But that being said, Isaac makes some throws that are darts only, we'll say.
Darts only, indeed. The one to Brant was
only
deep. Dorian had a couple of big ones too. Even like I said, the ones where it wasn't a perfect pass, he still got it in the area where it needed to be, and then a Utah receiver was able to step up and help out the freshman quarterback who threw it a little bit off target.
I think Money Parks did a great job where he went back for a ball, and if that had been delivered on time, money's still probably on his, running all the way from Oklahoma back home to Salt Lake City. So learning experiences, but again, it's these good problems to have, right? Where your true freshman quarterback just went in and started in what I was calling the biggest game of the season, as far as I could see on the schedule. The two games that I looked at that I thought were most critical in terms of, obviously week to week, every game matters, but this was the one I had circled, like, okay, now you can start really getting excited about this team. And I believe it. And it's not just Cam Rising at quarterback. It's this team as a whole. They went out and won a tough game in a hostile environment. Although I was a little disappointed. I thought Boone Pickens was going to be more full. I will concede that it was a hot day. Like, we were joking watching at home when they showed that thermometer up on the screen, like it was going to do the cartoon thing where it just starts melting down the side because the arrow was just pointing straight down. So, like, anytime a reporter is on TV talking about how the on-field temperature is 140 degrees, that's hot, right? And then, you never want people to be out just sitting in the hot sun for too long. A football team's got all those cooling zone fans and everything like that. They're almost more taken care of than the fans in some regards. But all that being said, you just have to look at this game and just be so happy, so proud as a Utah fan. And I hope everybody had a good time watching it. And I know we do want to talk about it a little bit at this point. The injury stuff does get in the way of that a little bit, and it's frustrating for everybody. I think it's frustrating for the players. But I thought they did a good job of transitioning that frustration into a win today. College football is tough. It is a really hard sport. And I made the joke today, like, man, I'm complaining about these guys while I'm sitting on my couch feeling too full from all the snacks I ate. and you have to keep some of that in perspective, but also, from week to week, these guys are always competing for everything they do. And that can be both exhausting, but it can also push to some extreme highs.
Brian, this was a ton of fun. You mentioned College Football Network. Can you fill me in a little bit more on that and on everything else you got going on?
Yeah, I just write about everything over there, from, how many teams or how many Heisman winners do teams have. Like, I want to tell people, if you really truly love college football, the sport, there is everything over there at College Football Network. Cam Miller is a wizard. They let me, I basically just hang out there. I think like I said, my interview, I told them I was a football guy, and I mentioned something about Western Kentucky, and I think that caught their ears. So, I just have fun and have learned so much. But I will shout out Cam Miller and Ollie Hodgkinson as just two of the best in the business in terms of knowledge and understanding and the sheer volume of games that they consume. And they are doing a great job to build that site. I'm just grateful to, like I said, get to hang out in the Slack channel and learn from them and watch the great ones work. And in the meantime, you can always catch me on Friday nights, Rewind Sports Network. We're always talking ball. And then, the few times a year where I get to come on Locked On Utes and hang out with my best friend.
Hey, it's an absolute blast, my friend. Thank you so much. Truly, so grateful and lucky to have you on. And thank you again for making the time.
I love being here, man. I appreciate you. And, I'm genuinely proud of what you've done with this thing. And, you always know who your biggest fan is. Well, obviously it's Mama Wistrcill, number one. Also one of the best cookie makers on the planet, by the way. But if there's a slot for number two behind the Wistrcill family, I'm right there for it.
Well, you know how much I appreciate you, brother. Thanks again for hopping on. That's going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. This was Utah's biggest test, at least in the preseason, what we thought would be their toughest game. They aced it. So now everything's in front of them. What happens with Cam? What can we learn from the film? How can this team get better? Because they clearly still can to me. What's going to be the latest on the injuries? Like we said, we probably won't know, but we'll still try to figure it out. So we hope you'll join us on the next episode of Locked On Utes, but Utah gets it done against Oklahoma State.